Hey. Before we start, I recommend you do two things. First, check that your door is locked. Second, put your headphones on, because tonight every sound will matter. In this video, 5 stories. All of them were sent in by people who claim this happened to them personally, or to someone close to them. I can't verify any of them. But I can tell you this. The details in these accounts repeat across dozens of other sources that never had any contact with each other. And that alone is a little unsettling. If you're new to the channel, every week here brings stories that keep you on edge until the very last second. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, turn off the lights. Story 1, The Neighbor from the Photo. This story was sent in by a girl named Oksana from a small town in western Ukraine. She asked us to change details that could identify her, so the name is fictional. Oksana moved into a new apartment 3 years ago. The building is old, from the Soviet era, a typical stairwell, peeling paint, dim lighting on the stairs. In her very first week, she decided to take a few photos of the new apartment to send to her parents, to show how she'd settled in. She photographed the kitchen, the room, the view from the window. And one shot, the hallway, taken by accident when the phone camera hadn't switched off yet. That evening, looking through the photos, she noticed something in the corner of the hallway in that accidental shot. A silhouette. Not sharp, blurred, resembling a person standing facing the wall. At the time she thought, a shadow from a coat on a hook. A logical explanation. She locked the door, went to bed. The next morning she remembered, there's no coat hook in the hallway. No furniture at all in that corner. She told her upstairs neighbor about it, a woman in her 60s who's lived in the building since childhood. And the woman replied calmly, almost matter-of-factly, "Oh, that's just him. He stands there when something changes in the apartment." Oksana asked who him was. The neighbor just waved her hand and said that before her, an elderly couple had lived in that apartment, and the husband died right there in the hallway, waiting for an ambulance that never made it in time. "He's just checking that everything's alright," the neighbor said. And closed her door. Oksana says she's never photographed that hallway again. But sometimes, when she comes home late and turns on the hallway light a second later than she should, she feels like the silhouette manages to slip back into the shadow just in time. She still lives there. She says she's gotten used to it. If you're already feeling a little uneasy, this is a good time to remind you, online, you're never alone. Online, you're never really alone at all. The next story is exactly about that. Story 2, Someone Else on Camera. This story was sent to me by a man who works remotely and has video calls almost every day. Let's call him Maxim. Maxim lives alone, in a studio apartment. His desk sits by the window, his laptop camera faces him directly, and behind him is a wall with a bookshelf. A typical background for any call. One day, during an important meeting with clients, a coworker messaged him in chat something like, "Maxim, is someone standing behind you?" Maxim turned around. No one there. He's alone in the apartment, the door locked with both locks, as always. He replied to his coworker with a joke, "Go on, show me where." The coworker sent a screenshot. In the frame, over Maxim's shoulder, in the dark gap between the shelf and the wall, something resembling the outline of a person was visible. Not sharply. More like a darker patch shaped like a silhouette, taller than Maxim, slightly bent, as if it were standing hunched under the ceiling. Maxim laughed it off in front of everyone, said it was just a lamp's shadow. The meeting went on for another hour. But that evening, when he re-watched the recording of that meeting, right at the moment his coworker mentioned the silhouette, there's a quiet sound on the video. Like an exhale. Right off camera, very close to the microphone. Maxim checked the apartment. Windows closed. Door locked, there are no neighbors who could knock or talk through the wall that loudly, it's a load-bearing wall with good soundproofing. He says that ever since, he always sits with his back to the wall, not to the shelf. And that sometimes, when he's working late, he feels like something is leaning in closer to the screen behind him, right when he forgets to think about it. The next story is the shortest of all. But it's the one that gets me the most comments saying, "This happened to me too." Story 3, The Voice on the Intercom. This is a story from a man named Iyer, who lived on the 5th floor of an apartment building. One winter evening, around 11, the intercom rang. Iyer picked up silence. Not the kind of silence where the line is simply dead, but the kind where you can feel someone breathing and listening back. He said, "Hello," twice. No one answered, but the line stayed open. He could hear faint street noise from the other end of the intercom. A minute later, the call came again. Silence again. Iyer hung up and decided to forget about it. At midnight, another call. This time, when he picked up, he heard a voice. Quiet, distorted through the intercom speaker, almost unintelligible, but he made out the words clearly, "Let me in, it's cold out here." Iyer didn't answer. He hung up, turned off the hallway light, and went to bed, though sleep didn't come right away. The next morning he went downstairs, just to check that the intercom was working properly. And on the panel, right across from his apartment's button, he saw a fresh handprint, at a height that would fit a child better than an adult. He still lives in that building, but he says he never picks up the intercom after midnight anymore, no matter how many times it rings. If you're home alone right now, feel free to pause, go check your intercom, and come back. I'll wait. Let's continue. Story 4, The Dashcam Recording. This story is a bit different from the others, because it involves something that could, in theory, be checked, although no outside person has actually seen the video in question. A driver named Andre was driving down a highway at night between cities, on his way back from a business trip. The road was nearly empty, forest on both sides, fog knee-deep in places. Around 2 a.m., his car's dashcam captured something on the side of the road. Andre says that at the moment he drove past it, he didn't notice anything unusual, maybe because he was watching the road, not the sides. But watching the recording the next day, to check the route for a report, he paused on one frame. A figure. Tall, too tall to be human, standing completely still at the edge of the forest, facing, if you could call it a face, straight toward the road, as if it had been waiting for that exact car. The strangest part isn't the figure itself. The strangest part is that in the very next frame, 1/17 of a second later, it's already standing 2 meters closer to the road. With no movement in between that the eye could physically track. Andre says he only showed the recording to 2 friends. One said it was just a camera sensor glitch from the fog and oncoming headlights. The other went quiet for a long moment, then asked, "Are you sure you weren't giving anyone a ride that night?" Andre answered that he was driving alone. The second friend then said that in the recording, 1 second before the figure appears, there's a shadow visible on the passenger seat inside the car, as if someone were already sitting there. Andre doesn't take that route anymore. Not even during the day. Last story for today. And honestly, it's the one that makes me check the balcony lock every night before I go to sleep. Story 5, Letters from a Neighbor Who Doesn't Exist. The last story was sent in by a woman named Marina, who was renting an apartment in a new building. 2 months after moving in, she started finding notes in her mailbox. Not mail from the post, actual handwritten notes, folded in 4. The first one simply said, "Please, be quieter at night." Marina was confused. She lived alone, never threw parties, and was rarely even home late. She figured the note had been meant for someone else and threw it away. A week later, a new note. "I hear you walking around at 3 in the morning. Please stop." Marina was asleep at 3 a.m. Always. She started to worry and asked the building concierge whether there had been any complaints about her. The concierge said no complaints had come in, and that, as far as she knew, the apartment below Marina's was actually empty, still unsold since the building was completed. The third note arrived 3 days later. It read, "I know you're reading this right now. Stop walking above me." Marina says that's when a chill ran down her spine, because she found that note standing in the hallway of her own apartment, not by the mailbox. The note was lying right on the mat by her front door. On the inside. She moved out 2 weeks later. When Marina told the concierge about that last note, the woman went pale and said the apartment below really was empty. Pause 2's, empty and locked for over a year, ever since the previous owner had died there one night, and wasn't found for almost 3 weeks. Marina still doesn't know who wrote those notes. And she still doesn't know how they ended up inside her own apartment. That's it for today. 5 stories, none of which has an explanation that would satisfy everyone. If one of them got to you, tell me in the comments which one, and why. Pause 1's, I read every comment, and by the way, that's where I get half the stories for future videos. If you have a similar story of your own, real or not, that doesn't really matter, send it in the comments or a DM, maybe next time you'll hear your own story here, from me. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and before you fall asleep tonight, check one more time that your door is locked. See you next time.